Welcome to Wildspire. You get to be a fly on the wall for my intimate conversations with entrepreneurs who are changing the world. I'm your host, Stephanie Benedetto, coach, storyteller, and unmarketer at The Awakened Business, helping coaches and change-making entrepreneurs unleash their inspired message and share it with playful unmarketing. I'll ask curious questions and explore uncharted waters with my guest today. Anything can happen when we step into the unknown of infinite creativity, and that's where we're going to play. My guest today is Clare Dimond. I'm so excited to introduce you to her. Her books have had an immense impact on me personally. They're both provocative and insight-inducing. They ask deep questions and point to the nature of what we really are. Not our body, not our personality or our thoughts, but the infinite creation before that. I have never heard anyone speak so clearly and so simply about the nature or non-existence of the self. And I got more and more calm throughout our conversation. It was just a joy spending time with her. Now that we've got the love fest out of the way, let me tell you a little more about Clare Dimond. Clare's always been fascinated by human behavior and its relationship to thought and belief, initially from the perspective of trying to cure her own anxiety, limitation, and lack of ease, and then from a more universal or philosophical perspective. Her career has had two prongs: global marketing for agencies, corporates, and her own consultancy. And alongside that, psychology, neurolinguistic programming, clean language, yoga, meditation, and hypnotism. Clare now uses all of this experience and study to understand the root of human suffering and how the mind's activity can settle to reveal the peace and freedom that lies beneath. Over the years, Clare works with one-to-one clients and groups in different ways. Her work combines two approaches. One, engaging the conscious intellect in the logical exploration that the reality of self and other is a construct of perception. Two, amplifying the deep unconscious knowing through bespoke subliminal recordings. She runs monthly online programs including such topics as change, stress, relationships, money, and health, and has written 6 books as part of the Getting Real series, which I highly recommend. Now, all of that sounds kind of abstract and convoluted, but when you actually speak with Clare, it becomes very, very simple. You're about to see what I mean. Clare Dimond. Hello, Clare, and welcome. I'm so excited to have you here on Wildspire.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Steph. It's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so I want to share how I first came across you. And it was last year, a friend of mine bought a copy of your book free for me.
Oh.
And I started reading it, and I read in the introduction the story that you had written about the boxes and, carrying around all these boxes. And I thought it was perfect for my Wild Creation Stories podcast. And I was led to reach out to you, and you graciously allowed me to use that and share your story. And I will link to that because I love that story because it talks about, it points to something that I'm drawn to explore over and over again. And that's, what are we really? Who are we really? How are we made? What is this life? And it is a beautiful story that's fun to read, but also deeply touching, and that shows us something about that. So that was my first introduction to you. And then I also recently read your book, Real.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show it. The Inside Out Guide to Being Yourself. And you're a powerful, potent writer. As we were discussing this in a book club, it came out that, I said, I don't know if I would recommend this to somebody brand spanking new. Like, I don't know, because it's so potent. So I said, yeah, it's intense, but I would recommend it. And I was like, well, I don't know that I wouldn't recommend it. It was very funny, but I really like it. I like it because it's almost like, I got to think about it. And I'll tell you a little more about some of the things that struck me perhaps as we get into it. But anyway, that's a little introduction, how I met you. So I was looking at your website and noticed that you're in the midst of a program right now around stress.
Yeah.
And do you want to tell me a little bit about that? Like, what is it about? What are you exploring?
Yeah, sure. Oh, thank you for that lovely introduction. That's so sweet. Um, well, is it, I guess what Real, the book, is about really is that there's an idea of a self that we think we are, and that self-identity has to be protected and defended because it looks like life and death. It looks like if that is rejected, or if it's not invited out, or if it's not welcomed, or if it doesn't get the promotion, or if it has to speak in public, or if it's challenged or confronted, it looks like our whole being is at stake because our idea of what we are is under threat. And what Real and all the other books look at from different perspectives is that idea isn't at all what we are. It's that idea is a creation of belief, and really, embedded belief. It's what we've been told. It's what we've picked up from parents and peers and teachers and media, and so it's a conditioned concept of ourselves that is constructed really like a house of cards, because it's all made of mental constructs. And so in stress, what we're considering is that a signal from the sort of this, I call it the system. People don't really like that term, but I don't know a better way, like the mind, body, brain, self, environment, like there's a whole, really, a whole system. A signal within that is like of stress, is like a light going on in a car dashboard. There's something out of alignment here. There's something not flourishing, not thriving. And the suggestion and what we're looking at on the course is, first of all, that we begin by considering what that self-idea is. Because when that is under threat, the whole system crunches up. And we know it, don't we? Like if we're, we were talking before we started recording about Facebook, and, might see something happening on Facebook and we're like, oh, crunched up with jealousy, or, we feel left out or excluded or isolated. And so if we begin, consider it like the spider in the web, this self-idea, because it's so powerful and so, there's so many strands go off it that have to, my body, my job, my children, my house, my garden, my town, my road, my future, my past. There's all these elements of this self-identity, my football team, which is happening this evening in Europe, and the threats to any of that can cause immense stress. But when we don't understand really what that self is, we either have to numb the stress, or we have to try and fix it. But all we're really doing is fixing a mirror image, really, of that self-identity, because when we're feeling particularly vulnerable, the whole world is looking threatening, and we're trying to manage that threat out there, but really it's because there's a vulnerability happening here. And so over this month, we're looking at stress from that perspective, that there's something out of line in the system. And we're going to begin with this idea of the self, because that's a massive confusion. That's really, we're so, our thinking is so conditioned to believe it, and it's not true. And when that confusion eases, then there's then there's more openness, there's more space, there's more sanity, and there's so much more possibility of really responding to what's going on in the body, or responding to what's going on in a relationship, or responding to a job that isn't right for us, or voicing our own authentic yes or no to something. You know, it's so much more possible when we're not trapped in this belief cage, really, of what we should and shouldn't do, and how we should be, and and what we are, when that's just a creation of thought. Yeah.
So what is this misunderstanding that we have about the self? And what is it really? Like, if you can, because I can feel it when you talk about it, Claire. I can feel it. And I'm like, oh, yeah. But I want to hear more, and I want to share more about this.
Well, what it seems to be is that when we're born, we are pure consciousness, we could say, pure intelligence in a form. We're pure love. You know, we see it in a baby's eyes, that open, unconditional love. And that life in that form needs to survive. You know, it's wired to survive. And what it really is, so what that life is, it seems to be, it's like a localization of intelligence and awareness, love, peace, freedom, joy, playfulness in a form. So that oneness, life, which is indivisible, has a location in that form. And it really seems to be that what happens as the baby grows and it gets told, you're like this, you're like that, this is what you have to do, which is, you know, you mentioned the introduction in Free. It's like, you know, this is what you have to do to be loved. This is what you have to do to be free. This is what you have to do to be successful. And that localization starts to take on a construct around it of what I am. So it's no longer just life in a body, it's me. And it becomes really weighted down by all of these beliefs. And that becomes our idea of self. And instead of the self being, as it was at the beginning, about the survival of life in the body, of, you know, the continuation of life in that form, it becomes the survival of that tower of belief and convictions and associations and meaning and projection. And that's what starts to be protected. Instead of actual survival, so the fight or flight reaction, instead of that being about the physical survival, it becomes about the preservation of this self-identity. And it really seems, you know, when we work with people for whom that self-idea is very insecure, and you often, you know, you listen to what they've experienced as children, and you can really see how easily it is that self-idea, like that, the mix-up of physical survival and self identity comes so fused, because the environment that they're brought up in is so insecure and perilous and unstable. And all the time there's this attempt to do the right thing and to survive and think about, you know, anticipate adults' moves, you know, and to try and survive within that. And so the self-identity is very vulnerable and is formed in the basis of lack and incompleteness. And that continues then for all our lives, because for all our lives, up until, we listened to one of your podcasts, the lens through which life is viewed and the lens through which the self is understood is one of insecurity. And we're looking all the time for security, because we know deep down what we were when we were born. We remember that peace and freedom, and we're trying to find it out there in relationships or in jobs or in people being nice to us or having the right body, or we're trying to find it. And it's a hopeless search, because nothing is going to secure that idea of self, because it's by definition incomplete. It's by definition an overlay or a veil over the peace and freedom we were when we were born. And so the only and I refer to this sort of conversation really as a brick wall, because it says that search that we're on is unfulfillable. It's futile. The only way peace can be found is in recognizing that, because it's the search itself that is hiding. Because without thought, without belief, we would just be peace. It's the search that is going on in this mind with this created idea of self that is hiding the truth of what we are. And so all the work I do really is to address that at two levels, really. Either through the conscious, rational, logical mind, to really show how this outside world can't be perceived objectively, and how the mind is continually creating and then reacting to its own creations. So there's the conscious element, and then I do work with subliminal recordings to sort of amplify what's known deep down, so that becomes more obvious and more available than this sort of soap opera of mind. All the drama and tension of mind becomes, the idea is that the subliminal speaks directly into the brain to say that surface layer of thought, ever-changing roller coaster, completely variable, is not the truth. The underlying space of awareness in which that is happening is what we really are. Yeah, sorry, that's quite a long answer.
Oh, it's beautiful. As I'm listening, I feel it. And I think that you have a way, Claire, of talking about this, that even though, as I think I said earlier, your book, my experience of reading Real, was a bit bracing at certain points. And I say bracing, like I just was like, whoa, I liked it. Let me just tell you, I liked it. I really liked that about it. And it also made me go, whoa, 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 run that by me again.
Yeah.
And when I hear you talk about this, there's a clarity with which you see it, but there's also a gentleness. There's also like a softness. And it's not that isn't in Real, but it's almost like, hey, wake up and stop for a second. Like, wake up out of the dream, wake up out of the trance. And the thing that got me in the chapter that really got me in Real was you are not in control.
Yes. Yeah.
I loved it. I read it several times. And I this is an exploration I've been in for years myself. thinking about this, it caused me to kind of go back and look at some of the things. I was like, wow, what journey have I been on? I remember creating a series of videos, 21 reasons to stop trying to control your life. And I was like, what were the reasons? And it was really fun to look at that and see it. But so I mean, I've been asking myself about this, but there's like, every time I look at it, there's less that I need to do. There's less to be done. There's nothing to be done. Like that, which you come to toward the end of the book. And I'm like, oh my God, it kind of blows my mind a little bit. So, I don't want to ask about this. I get to ask anything. Isn't that amazing? So what is it that when people see it, so you're in this conversation around stress and looking at, I love how you've put this so simply that, this thing that we're trying so hard to preserve and that we get kicked into fight or flight about, it's not us. It's not the real us. And it really doesn't exist. It's like, so when we start seeing, like, what is it that we begin to see about our idea of a self that then releases this stress or changes our relationship with what we call stress?
Yeah, wow, what a lovely question. And I think it relates a lot back to that chapter actually that you mentioned about you're not in control. And I knew that that's what you were going to say, that chapter, because I don't get any comment ever on the book apart from on that chapter. Always. And it's because I think it's from when we're looking at out on the world from this perspective of a deciding, controlling, independent, separate self, the idea of that self not being in control of anything is completely confounding and confrontational, and it seems to flip. So it's either I'm in control or there's just no point then. I'm just going to give everything up and just be passive, let fate take over. That's how it is. So either control or no control. But what we're considering is that it's not that the self is either in control or not in control. It's literally that there is no entity that could be in control or not in control. It's just a belief that there is. I know.
I love that. Yes, keep going. Don't mind I'm very expressive. You're going to see lots of things on my face. Go.
And I think when there's a glimpse of that, because if we think about stress, really, stress is really a resistance to what is, and it's the idea that this should be different. I should be able to do this differently, or they should be behaving differently. And so it's an argument really with reality, because it's unacceptable how reality is. And so that depends totally on the idea of a self that should be able to control stuff and should be able to make everything happen so that finally we can be peaceful and finally we can be happy and finally we can be free. And so life really takes the form of an ongoing attempt to control everything, our body, our mental state, our thoughts, our beliefs, our future, our family, our friends, our work, everything is an attempt to control all of that. And when there's a glimmer that actually not only is the way all of it appears a a creation of this learned perception, really, a perception that's been honed by our conditioning, honed by beliefs. So not only can all of that reality and self, everything, only appear a certain way because of what's been learned, there is nothing in control of that. So when the baby is learning the sky and the ball and the dog and speech and walking and crawling, there's no entity controlling what is being believed. Belief is just happening. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? And so that whole thing, no one is controlling it, and no one is controlling it now. While we're talking and people are listening, there's no one is controlling the words happening here, and no one is controlling listening happening. Listening is just happening. And that is a total shift of what we are. Because then what we are becomes the witnessing space to the words, to the beliefs, to the behaviors, to the habits, to the addictions, not the controller of them, the noticer of them. And the shift from trying to control, believing that I'm the thing doing all of this, which is insane, and we're all insane, all of us, to seeing what happens, seeing what gets said, and in that space, different learning happens because for the first time, that behavior is actually being seen for what it is. And so in that space, all the conditioning can change. Habits can fall away, addictions can end, conflict can, even after decades, can be over because it doesn't make sense anymore for all of these actions and words to come from this place of separation and isolation and protection and defense. That whole entity is no longer the dictator. It's seen for the illusion it is. And then the behavior starts to align with the absence of that separation, really. It starts to align with from the understanding of wholeness and completeness and the end of the search. There's nothing more to get. There's just expression. I think we could say expression of truth in a form. And I think control, and it's why it's so confronting, is at the heart of that illusion. And the idea of giving up control is horrific to that self because it believes that's survival. It believes that it has to have control in order to keep everything working. But it's working already. It's all working without the idea of self. And that allows the realization that it is all just life in a form flourishing. That's it.
Yeah. I loved, since I have been exploring this for a while, there were a lot of areas where I was able to kind of go down the checklist, you are not in control of other people. I'm like, definitely not. Got that one. Okay. You are not in control of other people's feelings. Yep. Still, sometimes I try, but I know I'm not. Like, I really kind of get that. You're not in control of your thoughts. I'm like, yeah, I'm seeing that. You're not in control of your feelings. Definitely seeing that. I'm all over the map. You're not in control of your moods. Okay, that sort of follows. You're not in control of your actions. And I went, what? What? That's where I did the double, triple, quadruple take and spent a few days. This was a few weeks ago. I spent a few days in that. I was like, okay, there's something I'm feeling in that. And there's something that's like short circuiting my brain around it. So I'm going to stay with it. And as I sat with it, I was like, what? Somewhere in the inquiry of it and the sitting with it and the pondering it, without really getting freaked out, it was a little bit uncomfortable, but it was a good discomfort. It's the kind of discomfort that I've come to associate with, oh, wow, something really new is happening here. Like something is shifting and I'm about to really see something that I've been missing, And I saw that I was trying to let go of control in this area. And like, it felt true, but I was trying and I couldn't. And it was like, there was this struggle going on around it. And then I saw, control doesn't exist. I made that up. Yeah. And then I started laughing like, oh, Stephanie, this is much ado about nothing again. Mm. It is just this experience. When you talk about being a tiny baby, and just being this like wide open, alive space of awareness, like there is no differentiation. The baby doesn't know that it has fingers and toes. It doesn't know that there's a mother that is other who takes care of it. It is like only the pure experience. And when you talk about that, it just, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. And I have that experience. Sometimes it was, it's interesting to feel like I have just a finger or just the remembrance of that while I'm in the midst of this gorgeous illusion that we call life, And it's so much more fun to play in it. But what I'm wondering is, so I've been in this a while and still finding these places where I'm making up that either moments or certain areas of my life where it still looks like I need to have this control in myself and all of that. So for someone who is like, the idea of not having control is terrifying. So I see like a lot of, there's like a development path that I've been on, and I also see a lot of people on where they feel like I'm so out of control. I need something like, and they're a victim of the world. Like the world is making me feel this way. My parents, the trauma, the whatever things that they have. And then at a certain point they go, no, there's a choice and I have choice. And it's empowering. And they begin to see that something different is possible. So it's a beautiful part of the journey. And also I see that with babies, not that they ever had a problem, because they didn't, but that they begin to assert the self, and they go through the stages of, no, I'm not going to do that. Me, mine. And they learn how to be a separate self. And it's like they really have to learn it and practice it, right? Like it doesn't just happen. I mean, it's a part of the development, but they work at it and they work hard. And parents are like, oh my God, the terrible twos. Like this is what we knew was going to happen. We thought our darling was going to be different, but no. They're a monster, right? And this happens, and then there's a point where this trying to control everything, my thoughts, my feelings, like I think I made my life very small to try to keep out the things that disturbed my peace and avoid the things that upset me. Yeah. And stay with the things that feel good to me, because all of this comes from outside of myself. And if I have a thought that doesn't work for me, I will change it. And I still sometimes see some of that residual, like I'm noticing that I'm either resisting it or trying to change, instead of just noticing it and being with it. I'm not in that place that we're talking about. I'm not touching that, oh yeah, that's right, everything. So how... like, what is it that we see? A couple years ago, I started talking about, I got intrigued by this idea of choicelessness. And I was like, what is choicelessness? And it felt like something really good, felt good about that. And it wasn't, now you are giving up everything and you're helpless and hopeless and there's nothing. It didn't feel like that. It felt open and expansive, which I come to know the way I was thinking about choicelessness was not messy and stressing for me. It was actually beautiful. So what is happening in that shift? Like, I just said a lot of things. I'm not sure exactly what I'm asking, but like, what do you see in that? Because I think you've been in this journey and on this journey with people.
Yeah. And I really get what you're saying. I see it as like three stages in a way. So the baby born conceptless, with a powerful mind, a mind that is primed to create concepts and primed for imagination and primed to create projections into the future and to have all of these ideas. But initially there is just that space, that watching space, voicing its needs, but not confused in any way by any concepts of what it is. And then the second stage is when concepts start to develop and are believed. And that is, like you said, is really necessary. Like it's a critical part of the development of a human to have that sense of separateness, because from that comes language, comes the ability to operate in the world, to work out time, to work out, the planning, everything. And so it's a critical part, and it's part of that is to have the idea of me as its own organism, really, because that also is of evolutionary advantage. So an identification in with this system allows all of that planning and that mental superpower to be applied to the survival, really, of this form. So it's great. It's perfect design. And then it seems to me the third natural evolution is to move mentally, intellectually, spiritually, fundamentally, move beyond the trap of conceptual belief into a spiritual maturity, we could call it, or a third phase where concepts are understood and are useful and fulfill their function of being a container of information, but they lose any confusion that they're reality, that they're true. And that, I think, then, and I think it seems to be, I don't know, as a humanity, that's maybe where we're all moving to, because there are so many amazing teachers and books and podcasts, that make this more and more available. That the mind just gets understood, I think, for what it is, which is a creator of representations that actually have nothing to do with reality. And there's a lovely quote by Alan Watts that says the self is obviously not true any more than we can get wet in the word rain. And I'm sort of probably messing up a little bit, but it's along those lines. The concepts of mind are not reality, but we need to. In a way, I feel like it's like learning how to drive a like top Formula One car. It's so powerful, this mind. And this third stage is really about understanding the full capacity of the mind to imagine and to create without it driving us, without it being so powerful that everything is just lost in that power and it takes off on a life of its own. And it seems that this now is where the full design is in full operation, that everything's aligned really. The mind is sane. There's no longer a belief in things that aren't true, that are just representations. The behavior as a result, because it's no longer that belief of a self that has to be protected. All the behavior, the living, the flourishing, the thriving is aligned to the wholeness of life itself. And that seems to be the evolution of what's possible, it seems. And for some of us it's harder because, like you're saying, that desire to control, I think when life has been very, very unstable, that desire to control is so compelling and so overarching of everything that it's very hard to let that go. We have to feel very safe, I think. Like the mind has to feel like, I don't know, I think there's a real power in therapists who are so grounded in understanding and in peace and in freedom, that to hold another in that space, to allow that terror of mind, that like what would happen if I were to lose control, to allow that to soften, and because it's only then that it can be seen really, well, nothing would happen. It would just be this. It would be the same, but without the agony and the exhaustion and the effort and torture of a mind that is fighting itself, really, turning in on itself. So yeah, it's we're amazing miracles that it just needs a little bit of learning, in a way, I think. Learning and a falling away of what's not true, and then we're good.
I love the way that you've described those stages, Claire, because I think in my mind I was looking at all the obstacles and the places where people tend to get hung up, and in particular, of course, where I have been hung up in the process of this growth and this learning, and also many people who I am working with, seeing them hung up in similar places. But showing the natural evolution and coming back to that connects me to, oh yeah, it's always been happening the way it's meant. There are lots of misunderstandings along the way, but that's actually not part of the process. That's not the natural process. That's the misunderstanding. That's kind of, and yeah, it happens. It's not that there's anything wrong that it happens. It's really normal that it happens.
Yeah.
But it sort of is showing me, but it just is a different way of framing it that's actually very powerful for me. So thank you for that. And this is what I'm seeing too, is that the more sense of my own safety that you're talking to, the more I am seeing, oh yeah, we really are okay. And I don't have the full experience of that in every moment. I'm in and out of it, but I do have it. and I have it more, and I have it more, and I have it with other people. And when I do that, they and I can then, it isn't scary to drop these ideas of what we thought we were holding ourselves together with it, right? We were holding together this idea of ourselves. It's not terrifying anymore. And in fact, it's a huge relief. And we can feel it. Like that's what, and I'm guessing that someone listening could feel it, what you're talking to. And they may also have thoughts of other things that they feel as well that don't feel so great, but there's something in this. And I see it when I'm with people. And I know that when we are in that space, that's like we realign ourselves. And I think it's what you're talking about, like that idea of holding on to the concept as we go, oh, that concept isn't real. And we start to it's not quite so pervasive anymore, just a little less, without even trying. We don't even have to do anything with it, because when we come back to that, it does itself through us.
Yeah, so lovely. I think what you're describing is enlightenment. It's like the bit, either all in one go or bit by bit, falling away of the weight of belief and control, and the carrying around of these things that we just can't let go of, because what would happen if we did, and then they're let go of because they're just not believed anymore, or who knows what happens, that suddenly they just lose their compulsion, and and so there's less and less and less self, and it's a beautiful virtuous circle then, that the less protection there is, the more openness and the more freedom there is to really see others as exactly us, really no separation, and our behavior is so much more aligned to that, and so the world responds to that, it seems, and then there's more falling away, there's less and less protection needed. It's the opposite in the other direction of where that control and that protection and defense, we look out from that and we see a dangerous world. We see people who hate us, people who are ostracizing us, and so our behavior is defensive and protective, and then the world reacts to that, and it increases our belief, and we just get denser and denser and denser, and like you were describing earlier, we get more and more removed from the world, from relationships, from our own creativity, our own truth. And so I see these conversations as like a bridge from that spiral into, or in on ourselves, in on belief, in on control, a bridge out to just glimmers of a space that there's something else going on here, something beyond what the mind is creating.
Those glimmers are huge. That's a small space with infinite possibilities.
Love it.
It's like, woo!
I literally wrote that today for a blog for tomorrow. Yeah, literally, isn't that funny? Yeah, it really is that. Like, it's a tiny chink, but through it is the absolute. Yeah.
Yes, I feel it. Oh, how beautiful. Wow, thank you, Claire, for this. This was just what I needed today. A little glimpse, another little glimpse. So where can people find more about you and what you're up to in the world?
My website, www.claredimond.com.
And diamond is spelled differently, right?
Yeah,
Dimond.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you, Steph. And no I in Claire either, so it's a very complicated name. That's probably the best place to start. And I do a podcast every day of just like a 5 or 10 minutes, generally responding to questions that have come up on the courses. That's on iTunes. Claire's podcast, it's called.
Very complicated name.
Yeah. That's probably the good place to start, I would say. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I'm going to highly recommend that if you enjoy this conversation, check out Claire's books. Your books they're potent to me. Like there's a lot in them there to sit with and be with, and let the questions and the things that come up around it live in you, and let them find you in the world. If that's your thing, like it is kind of mine, apparently. Cool. Thank you, Claire. I would love to ask you many more things. Perhaps we will do this again, but I'm so grateful for this time.
Thank you, my lovely. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining me for today's Wildspire conversation. If you'd like to receive a weekly Wildspire email from me filled with inspiring stories, unmarketing experiments, tips for playing your way to impact and income without the hustle and hype, insights from my spiritual business journey, and more, go to theawakenedbusiness.com/Wildspire. Until next time, may you know yourself as the gorgeous wild creation you are.